Hey everyone, my name's Steve Tanner, and I'm very honored to be a speaker for this year's Kymfest. This is my second year and participating in Kymfest, and I love what they are doing. I love how they are trying to educate people about domestic violence and ways to promote nonviolent communication, as well as just helping people locate much needed resources. So I just want to say thank you to Kymfest and for you network for all that you're doing in our community. Now, a little bit about me. I live here in Nampa. I'm a life coach, and I specialize in teaching people ways to find more balance in their lives and to find more calm. And I also teach people about the effects of toxic stress and trauma on the body as well as the mind. And I teach a couple different modalities. One form of meditation called neurosculpting that considers how the brain works and kind of how the brain's structured, how it works, and what it needs in order to be more efficient and to be calm. And I also teach a form of exercise that aims at releasing stress that gets stuck in the body, and that's called tension releasing exercises, or TRE, and I'm certified in both of these modalities. And if you want, you can read more about me on my website at pathwaystointegration.com, or you can look for the same on Facebook, Pathways to Integration. Now, before I go on, I just want to provide a little disclaimer here. I am not a healthcare professional or a mental health professional. So please don't construe anything I'm saying as medical advice or psychological advice. I'm just a person who has some information that I like to try and convey to people that will hopefully be beneficial to their minds and their bodies. So today, I want to talk about something that I'm sort of becoming like an advocate for this, and something that's increasingly important to me, and that is how toxic stress and trauma affect children. Now, and you think about everything that's gone on this year. This has been a really crazy year. I had a friend on Facebook say that 2020 has been like her first husband. I thought that was kind of funny, a lighter side of 2020. But it's been a crazy year. I mean, with coronavirus, kids are having to stay home from school, parents can't go to work, some people are losing their jobs, they're losing their businesses, some people are getting sick, and some are dying, and we're having riots in some of the bigger cities. It's been a rocky year. And, I just would like to take a minute and just reflect on how this affects children. And my hope is to just sort of raise awareness about this topic, because it's my belief that when we interact with each other socially, we're not just having a conversation, but we're actually impacting each other's nervous system. I mean, as humans, as mammals, this is what we do. We do stuff to each other, when we interact. And what we do to each other, and especially to children, can have lifetime health effects. And it's my belief, it's kind of my mission, like I said, that I believe that society can be dramatically changed for the better if we as parents become more aware of how stress and trauma affect how we affect each other, but also how we're impacting children, or how children have been impacted. So today I kind of want to talk with parents and teachers about this. So first of all, I want to talk about a study that was done. It concluded back in 1997, and it was done down at the Kaiser Permanente Hospital Network in San Diego, California, along with the CDC. If you've lived in California, you probably know about Kaiser Permanente, a big, huge hospital network. But the results of the study are still just becoming like public knowledge, right? This concluded, 23 years ago, And I still bring this up in conversation to people, and people say, "Wow, I've never heard of that." And it's a very, very important study that I think that the more of us that become aware of this, the more that we'll see change in the lives of our children and also society. But what this study did is they studied the correlation of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, ACE, adverse childhood experience, and the correlation of those experiences with health issues. Not only in childhood, but also they tracked them. They tracked it back, from later on in life. For instance, they found that people who had really adverse sort of experiences and were in their system, in their hospital system, and they were being treated, for various kinds of illnesses and diseases. They surveyed them, and to see what they experienced in childhood, and they found some amazing things. They found that people with more of these kinds of experiences had greater incidences of heart disease and cancer and autoimmune disease and depression. So I'm going to just kind of lay it out for you a little bit how this study worked. So like I said, they had these people in their hospital system, that have all these illnesses, and now they're trying to find out what did they experience in childhood. And this is so they divided up these experiences into like 10 different categories. Number one is that the kids experienced recurring emotional abuse, or secondly, recurring physical abuse, or number had sexual contact, or they had physical neglect or emotional neglect. 6, substance abuse in the household. They're living with someone who's an alcoholic or a person with a substance abuse problem. 7, they had mental illness in the household. Same thing, living with someone who was depressed or had some other mental illness. 8, where the mother had been treated violently. 9, where there was divorce or separation. Or 10, where there was criminal behavior in the household, either currently or maybe someone had become incarcerated. But if those people had, had experiences in one of these categories, and each of those categories counted as 1 point. So then you add all those up. So for example, if you suffered physical abuse or physical neglect and emotional neglect, as well as living with mental illness in a home, then you would have a point in each of 4 categories. And so then your ACE score would be 4. So that's what they call the ACE score. Now some of you might object that these aren't the only kinds of things that you could have in this list. I mean, there could be a lot of other things that you could add to this list, and I absolutely agree with you. I'm right there with you. Excuse me. But for what it is, I mean, for what this study is and what it does look at, it's very revealing, and I just for now want to focus on that. But so what they found in this study, I mean, the results were kind of astounding. I mean, and we're talking about people in this study. There's like 17,000 people, so a huge number of people. 70% were Caucasian, college educated with middle income. And here's what they found. They found that the people who had an ACE score of 4, in other words, they had experience in 4 or more of those categories, that they were twice as likely to develop heart disease and cancer. They were 3.5 times as likely to develop COPD. That's a pulmonary disease, hard to breathe. And 4 times as likely to become depressed than those people who had a lower score, less than 4. Now, what this study is not saying is that these experiences cause these diseases, but rather there's a correlation. It's like, okay, we see these people that are struggling with these illnesses and diseases, and when we found out more about their lives, we found out that they had these experiences in childhood. So it's just kind of like, these sorts of things seem to go with these sorts of conditions later on. There's like, not saying a cause, but a correlation. But I think that what's interesting about this study is that, you know, when these things happen to children, it stays with them, and this is what I hope that we all hear, is that it stays with them. It impacts their bodies, their nervous systems, long after the abuse, long after the neglect, long after the social upheaval in their life, to the point that they're more likely to get sick. It's like stress and trauma gets baked into our bodies and our nervous systems, and it has long-term health effects. Now, not only, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit now, I'm going to pivot away from that study, and I want to talk about something a little bit different, is that not only does it have long-term health effect, but it actually changes our body chemistry and how our brains work. Now, since this study was done, we know a lot more about neuroscience. We know a lot more about how our brains and our bodies work under stress and trauma. So what happens is when we get stressed or we're confronted with trauma, we go into what's called fight or flight mode. You may have heard that before, fight or flight. You know, our fight or flight instincts in our bodies, they just jump into action. I mean, just think about, like, if you were hiking along in a trail and all of a sudden a bear pops out in front of you, you know, like, you know, just you could just feel your body go through all these changes. You tense up, you know, you just, you know, your all of your radar goes up. A lot of different things happen. But what we discovered is that there's like hormone shifts that happen in our bodies to get us ready to fight or to run away, you know. And here's the thing, our bodies do this naturally, automatically, instantaneously. You know, when we're threatened and to go into action, you know, we start pumping, you know, we go through these hormonal changes. You know, adrenaline and cortisol starts pumping through our body. You know, and cortisol causes blood sugar to release, you know, so we have more fuel, you know, to run away or to fight. So we go through a lot of changes like that. But here's not only, you know, in our bodies, and I could talk for a while on that, but I just want to focus on this point. Not only does it happen in our bodies, but our brains are impacted as well. Now, the parts of our brain that kick off this whole fight or flight response that I just talked about can become overdeveloped and even dominant. You may have heard of parts of our brain that are described as the amygdala or the hippocampus, and you know they're part of the brain that we call the limbic center, or the limbic part of the brain, and that's kind of like right here in the, you know, go deep into our brain. That's the limbic center. That's the center that responds to stress and trauma, and it's also where we experience a lot of our emotions. So here's the point about that I want to reach about this, is that our limbic brains, when they're continually processing adverse kinds of experiences, then that part of the brain becomes more the dominant way that we respond to the world. If the limbic brain is dominant, it's very hard to access this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain we need for thinking, you know, and for reasoning. You know, if this part of the brain is so active, then it's very hard to think. And this is where I want to speak to parents and teachers. So for kids that are in school, for example, if they're experiencing all of this stuff at home, then my point is that their emotional centers are reacting to things that are happening elsewhere in their lives. It's like their brains are stuck in fight or flight mode. It's like their brains and bodies, you know, are in this survival mode. The amygdala that I talked about, it's been called the smoke alarm of the brain. Now, how well do you function when you have a smoke alarm or a fire alarm going off? It's like all you can think about is turning that off, right? Well, people and children who have high ACE scores, they have a smoke alarm going off in their brains all the time. So they're not able to reason very well because they don't have full access to the reasoning part of their brains. So, they won't be able to do their homework, instead of, they just have trouble paying attention. And you might think, okay, might think of other ways that people have treated it, but I think that instead of putting on pressure, it might be better to just help them to find ways to get balanced and regulated again. And that's why in my coaching practice, what I teach is I teach ways to help people get regulated. I've mentioned them before, the neurosculpting and meditation, or doing the tension releasing exercises. I mean, these, people need tools. I think that's one thing that is one of the great things that's happening in our society right now, is that more and more people are discovering and writing about the tools, things that people can do, just learn how to do for themselves in order to bring themselves back to center. So it's my hope that if we can all become more aware of how adverse childhood experiences affect our children, perhaps we can be better at eliminating disease farther on down the road. So I just want to talk briefly about some of the ways that we can reverse adverse childhood experiences. Number one, get sleep. Number two, eat a healthy diet. Number three, exercise. Exercise is huge. Not only does it help us just release a bunch of tension, that got stored in our bodies, but it also releases another hormone in the brain that it's BDNF is the name of it, but it's been described as a miracle grow for the brain. In other words, it helps the brain grow new brain cells. It helps the brain make new connections. It's very, very important. Exercise is hugely important for reversing these kinds of experiences. Meditation and prayer. There's all kinds of studies that are coming out now that are showing that meditation and prayer are huge, and they actually can reverse development in the brain, for instance, in the limbic centers. So I'll just leave you that. I just want to leave you with a quote by a lady, this lady here, for this book, The Deepest Well. She is the Surgeon General from the state of California. And this is what she says. Sometimes I think folks out there are waiting for a fancy pill to show up, and they're missing the point that we as humans have a profound power to heal ourselves and one another. Look, the research defines toxic stress in children and long-term changes to brain and bodies in the absence of a buffering caregiver. So think about the flip side of that for us adults. We can damage each other's health by repeatedly activating the stress response, but we also have the power to heal ourselves and each other's biologically. So again, I have to stop here, but if you want to know more about about this topic, just go to my webpage, Pathways to Integration. If you've listened to the end, thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Steve Tanner. Be well, everyone.